Hi, this is Ofori, the digital reader, and today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be just basically wrapping up 2024, kind of going over my reading stats, what I read, and then also a peek into 2025 to kind of take a look at my TBR for 2025. So first, let's start with my 2024 reading stats. So my goal in 2024, and to be honest, every year my goal is 24 books. And that's because I'm not running a race. I'm not trying to see how much I can read so that there's pressure on me to call audiobooks reading, or is there pressure on me to read shorter books to get through a month or to hit a goal. I feel like 24 books means that every month I'm going to be reading something. And once I get to 24, even if you set that your goal, you're going to be surprised, because once you get through 24 books, you've become a reader. You're not going to be like, oh, I hit 24, I don't have to read for the rest of the year. You're going to have a hankering. So whenever I get to 24 books, I just keep going, So 2024, I read 54 books, so well over my goal. And that came out to 4.5 books a month, which was my average. I think my high was 7 books in a month, and my low was 1 book in a month. I read 15,035 pages. I read for 377.5 hours. Longest book I read was the Mahabharata, a modern retelling by Ramesh Menon. That was 1,496 pages. And my longest reading streak, and Bookshelf basically tracks your reading streaks. So that means that the longest I read every single day in a row was 12 days in a row. Usually I'll read 3 or 4 days or 5, and then I may skip a day. But there was a period of almost 2 weeks where every single day I was reading for at least an hour. And that's just because whenever I read, I don't know why, I always try to get at least an hour in a day. And the way I do that is, it varies. If it's a good book, I'll just sit down and knock out an hour or 2 or a couple hours. If it's a book I'm not loving, then what I do is I read like 4 times during that day for 15 minutes to kind of get through it, if the book isn't drawing me in enough to kind of read it all in one stretch. And lastly, as far as my 2024 reading stats, I was reading an average reading speed of 41.3 pages per hour. I'm pleased with that because the first month of January, when I was reading and kind of really tracking my reading, I was averaging around 35 pages an hour, and I didn't rush or anything, but just over the course of the year, I just got faster. So now, all the whole year taken into account, I'm reading at 41.3 pages per hour. So my top 5 books or series, I kind of lumped them together because a couple of these things in here are series, and it was hard for me to pick a book when I love so many of them. So my favorite series was Warlord Chronicles. I loved another series on this book, but the Warlord Chronicles was a series that really hit me in the gut. So the Warlord Chronicles series, the first book of that series is The Winter King, and that's by Bernard Cornwell. My second favorite book was the Lady Sherlock series, and the first book in that series is A Study in Scarlet, and that's by Sherry Thomas. The Gentleman Bastard series, and the first book in that series is The Lies of Locke Lamora. So far, I've only read the first book, but I loved it. As a matter of fact, I often talk about how I don't give in-depth book reviews because I feel it spoils the book. Well, there was a booktuber who said this was their favorite book of all time, The Lies of Locke Lamora. And I was like, whatever, let me try it. And I liked it so much that now I started to follow her, and I'm much more open to stuff she's going to recommend because she hit it out the park. I don't really need to hear her whole review. And sometimes I'll only listen to the first 15 minutes because I don't want to know too much. But if she highly rates a book, it's a good chance I'm going to check it out. And Oliver Twist, I was completely stunned by how much I loved Oliver Twist. It is so life-affirming to read a book that is over 150 years old, and that book, excuse my language, fucking brings it. This book was so good, and it was just so filled with stuff, and it just brought you back to that time. It was just like you were in a time machine. It was just such a great book. And I just had no idea. When I read the book, I was like, oh, it's going to be dry. I'm going to have to force myself to get through it. It's going to be a bunch of language I don't understand. This book just takes you back to that time and takes you back to the emotions going on there. It was just a great book. So I am very happy I read that. I never read it in college or high school or anything like that. So this was my first time reading it. Excellent book. And the last book in my top 5 books is Purity by Douglas Clegg. This is a strange, not a strange one, but this was a surprise to me because I got this book on Amazon First Reads, where basically every month Amazon has about 5 books that they are on their First Reads list, and you get to get one for free. I picked this book just because it was like the second month I was trying Amazon First Reads. So I was just like picking a book I didn't hate, not really one I loved, because First Reads generally is not going to have the more popular books on there. And last but not least is Purity by Douglas Clegg. This book is a story about a boy who basically lives in kind of like a summer town, like a Hamptons kind of thing. And he's a townie, so he lives there all year round. And he is in love with this wealthy up-to-two girl whose family comes there for the summer, and they have come for years. So he and this girl have formed a very close relationship. He's in love with her. She loves him, but not in the same way that he does. And so she comes back to the area one summer, and now she has a boyfriend, and it's about their relationship, and it's about his anger and how he deals with that, and it's about how he feels about her. I generally don't read books that are just mundane, no science, no fantasy, and just about contemporary human relationships. I almost never do. So when I read this book, I didn't go into it with great expectations. It amazed me. I just really felt for this guy, even though he did some crappy stuff. I kind of felt for him, and yet I also felt for the other people in the book. It's one of those books you read where you can't really be mad at anybody because they're all just being human. And when a book makes you feel like those characters that are written are like human enough that you can kind of forgive their foibles, then I feel like the writer's done his job. So after I read that book, I bought the other 2 books, and it's like a series of stories, a series of books. I think it's a trilogy. So I bought the other 2, and at some point I'm going to read those. They're not my TBR for next year, but they're definitely going to get read. It'll probably be it might be one of my wildcard reads for 2025. But it was a very surprising book. I would recommend, and it's a short read, so I would recommend you read the book if you just like a good human nature, a little bit of darkness, fixation, a little bit of jealousy, just so much human nature stuff going on that I really enjoyed it. So next is the books I read in 2024. I'm not going to go over and talk about each of them, and that's because every month in 2024, I did a book life video, and I basically talked about the books I read a little bit more in depth. Once again, I don't give synopsises, I don't give long reviews that tell you about the plot, but I kind of talked about how I felt about the books. So if it's a book that I rate highly and you read it and you like it, then there's a good chance we have the same taste. So like I said, I read 54 books in 2024. And when I started this journey, I thought 24 was a lofty goal. And then when I started to get to 24, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to smash 24. And then when I passed 24, I was like, oh, I'm about to keep reading, that's for sure. And that's what's good about having a low, consistent goal. You get to reward yourself with the victory of finishing it. And because you finished it and you've read a lot of great books, you're not going to stop anyway, but at least it lets you say, I am going to be reading books during the year, and that's going to be a goal to be reading. And for 2025, 24 books again is my goal, based off my reading last year and how I do my annual TBR. I have 72 books in my TBR, and so whatever I don't finish in that TBR just gets basically rolled over into the 2026's TBR. And for 2025, the books that are in my TBR, all of that information is going to be in the description. I put it here just because, you might want to pause and take a look, but they're all going to be in the descriptions. And once again, my wheelhouse is fantasy and science fiction and hero fiction, but I tried to pick some stuff that wasn't exactly in my wheelhouse. For example, I picked the yellow wallpaper. I picked Carmilla. So there's some stuff that I have here that, isn't exactly in my wheelhouse. I have some gay fiction. Some gay fantasy. I think I might even have a romance in here. It's somewhere floating around. But I tried to mix it up a little bit. And so that's my 72 books for the year. Like I said, it'll be in the description in case you want to take a look and see what's there. So that's kind of my wrap up. And, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked all the formulas. I would say to anybody right now who reads more than 30 books a year, whatever app you use, get yourself some type of app or program to help track your reading, because there is nothing so rewarding as looking back on a year and looking at all those stats and to see your progress and to see how many stories you got to experience and to see that you are box checked a reader. And I feel like a lot of people who are readers are magazine readers, or they're Audible listeners, or they do it on YouTube. I admit I watch a lot of YouTube, I watch a lot of TV. So for me, it was 377 hours that I did not watch TV and I did not watch YouTube and I was not on my phone doing stuff. So that's a win right there. So anyway, this is a digital reader. Keep reading.